Greetings. Welcome to Devotionables, brief devotions for busy people. My name is David, and today we're going to scratch the surface of Isaiah chapter 6. It is in this chapter that Isaiah receives his famous vision of Yahweh's throne. Leading up to this vision, Isaiah has indicted God's people as a sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity who have forsaken Yahweh, chapter 1, verse 4. They despised the Holy One of Israel, and because of that, they are utterly estranged. This sin, he goes on in chapter 2, verse 8 to say, included idolatry. Quote, "Their land is filled with idols, and they bow down to the works of their hands, to what their own fingers have made." End quote. Although the Lord planted them like a vineyard in chapter 5 and loved them, the fruit of justice and righteousness was not found in them, chapter 5, verse 7. Instead, Isaiah describes this people using their lips not to praise Yahweh, but to mock him, saying insincerely, quote, "Let the counsel of the Holy One of Israel draw near, and let it come that we may know it," chapter 5, verse 19, leading into our chapter. He concludes near the end of 5, much like he began the book. Quote, "They have rejected the law of the Lord of hosts, and they have despised the word of the Holy One of Israel." It's in this context that Isaiah receives his vision. The chapter develops in 4 segments broken up by Isaiah's phrase, "Then I said," that occurs in verses 5, 8, and 11. In verses 1 to 4, Isaiah sees that even when his earthly king has died, the high king of heaven remains enthroned in transcendent majesty. In verses 5 to 7, Isaiah sees that apart from atonement, iniquity and sin will always separate us from our high king because he is exalted in justice and holy in righteousness, chapter 5, verse 16, unlike his people. In verses 8 to 10, Isaiah receives a hard commission to herald the truth so zealously that God's people would become sluggish. So clearly, God's people would become dull of hearing, and with such illuminating brilliance that God's people would be blinded by the light of the world. And in verses 11 to 13, Isaiah looks for the light at the end of this tunnel of judgment, and he sees a seed of hope. Let's consider each of these segments a bit more closely. First, the word of the Lord in verses 1 to 4. "In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Sovereign One sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him stood the seraphim. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called to another and said, 'Holy, holy, holy is Yahweh of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory.' And the posts of the threshold shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke." With the nation's sinfulness and Uzziah's death in mind, God's covenant promises to Israel, in particular those to David, appear jeopardized. Isaiah, however, sees the Sovereign One, who is exalted over all earthly kings and kingdoms, like Isaiah 2 already showed us. He alone is high and lifted up. In Isaiah 57:15, he says also that the one who is high and lifted up, who inhabits eternity, his name is holy. What does it mean for Yahweh to be holy? That's a difficult question, isn't it? Interpreters will commonly assert that the term means something like set apart or distinct based upon a certain etymology, that is, a debated origin story for the word. But etymology is not the best way to understand words. It's better to derive the word's range of meaning from an analysis of its use in various contexts. So let's restrict ourselves, for example, to Exodus. In Exodus, we find holy ground, holy assembly, a holy abode, a holy Sabbath, a holy place, the most holy place, holy garments, a holy crown, a holy altar, even blood that makes atonement is holy. These are holy in a positive sense because they are devoted or consecrated for a particular purpose. The ground is devoted to the Lord for meeting with Moses. The abode and place are devoted to the Lord for dwelling and worship. The Sabbath is a day devoted to the Lord. The term holy itself then doesn't signify something as moral or pure or distinct, but those things may be entailed by being made holy. For example, a priest who is devoted to the Lord must, due to that consecration, live a life devoted unto the Lord, right? They're going to live holy lives because they have been devoted to him. As D.A. Carson has written, quote, "Be holy for I am holy" does not mean be God for I am God, end quote. or inside quote, but he keeps saying that people are to be reserved for God and for his service, end actual quote. So returning to Isaiah 6, what does this mean for the Trishagion, for the thrice holy declaration of the seraphim? For a term to be repeated in Hebrew literature, it emphasizes what we might use bold or italics for. It's extremely rare for a term to be repeated 3 times, and this is the only time in the Old Testament anyone or anything is thrice holy. The sense is that Yahweh is entirely or completely devoted, above all things, to upholding his name and displaying his glory. This is why Isaiah will later record Yahweh saying, quote, "I am Yahweh, that is my name, my glory I give to no other, nor my praise to carved idols." 42:8. And again, quote, "Before me no God was formed, nor shall there be any after me. I am Yahweh, and besides me there is no Savior." 43:10-11. So, in Isaiah 6, the Lord is thrice holy in particular now because he is devoted to his justice and righteousness, like the king ought to be. Chapter 5, verse 16. Even though the people are not devoted justice and righteousness, like we saw in 5:7. The Lord will keep his promises and uphold justice and righteousness, even if kings should fall. And this is significant because this begins Isaiah 7-12, where Isaiah is going to prophesy about the future Davidic king, whose throne is going to be, quote, established with justice and righteousness, chapter 9, verse 7. He is going to be the shoot from the stump of Jesse, which will judge with righteousness, 11:4. And so, let's move into verses 5-7. We've talked enough about the first 4, and here's the second segment of the passage. "Then I said, Woe is me, for I am silenced, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell amidst the people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, Yahweh of hosts. And then one seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a burning coal that he had taken with tongs from the altar. And he touched my mouth and said, Behold, this has touched your lips. Your iniquity is taken away, and your sin atoned for." Isaiah pronounces a curse with the exclamation woe, but not upon the people like he did 6 times in chapter 5, but upon himself. While your translation may read, "For I am lost," or "ruined," it's helpful to realize the term there means silenced, which is frequently employed to mean silenced in death. Isaiah's silence also indicates his and his people's inability to participate in heavenly worship, which he just saw. He's realizing what he would later write in 59:2. "Your iniquities have made a separation between you and your God," end quote. Since Yahweh is completely devoted to upholding his righteousness and justice as the sovereign one, there is no thought of bribery. There is no chance of getting off the hook. The Lord's provision of atonement for Isaiah's sin was his only hope. Let's turn to verses 8-10. They contain the third segment of our passage. "And I heard a voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Then I said, Here I am, send me. And he said, Go and say to this people, Keep on hearing, but do not understand. Keep on seeing, but do not perceive. Make the heart of this people dull, and their eyes heavy, and blind their eyes, lest they see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their hearts, and turn and be healed." Isaiah, humbled by his vision of the Lord, and with cleansed lips, receives a hard commission. His preaching will ultimately cause people to become what they worship. Because they are worshiping the works of their hands, they will become as unseeing, unhearing, and unfeeling as their own idols. We can see this picked up later in Isaiah 44, 9-23, which you can read later, but here's what it says. What we see there is people made in God's image who work as little creators as they image their Creator, but they're using their God-given imaging to make images. The ridiculousness of this action comes out in full in verses 19-21 of chapter 44. Here's what it says. "They do not, nor do they discern, for he has shut their eyes so they cannot see, their hearts so they cannot understand." We've heard that before, haven't we? Here, let's keep going. "No one considers, nor is there knowledge or discernment to say, Half of this burned into the fire, and then I baked bread on its coals, and then I roasted meat, and I ate it. And shall I make out of the rest an abomination? Shall I fall down before a block of wood? He feeds on ashes. A deluded heart has led him astray. He cannot deliver himself or say, Is this not a lie in my right hand?" Wow. Just like Yahweh alone could redeem Isaiah, so hardened sinners need Yahweh's servant who hears and speaks from Yahweh, see chapter 50 of Isaiah, to atone for them that they might once again be spiritually perceptive, Isaiah 53. If you're thinking about pursuing this line of thinking and how all of the hardening language works in Isaiah, see Greg Beale's volume, We Become What We Worship. It's a worthwhile study. But let's keep moving for sake of time. Verses 11 to 13, here's what Isaiah says. Then I said, How long, O Lord? And he said, Until cities lie waste without habitant, and houses without people, and the land is a desolate waste. And the Lord removes people far away, and the forsaken places are many in the midst of the land. And though a tenth remain in it, it will be burned again, like a terebinth or an oak, whose stump remains when it is felled. The holy seed is its stump. J. Alec Mateer says about this last line of the chapter, quote, This hope is the unexpected fringe attached to the garment of doom, end quote. Judgment will come until the tree of God's people is cut and burned back to a stump, a remnant, from which a seed will sprout. We are right to think about this as the shoot from Jesse, 11:1, and the servant who grows up, quote, like a shoot or like a root out of the dry ground, Isaiah 53:2. It is through this hoped-for one that the atonement for God's people would finally come, that would overdo and remedy the hard commission. Today we know his name, and his name is Jesus.